I'm filming this on the new Xiaomi 12T Pro, and it's got a really great main camera. This is the third time that Xiaomi have actually sent me one of their smartphones so I can test the cameras. And I have to say that I'm pretty impressed with this one. So right away you can see that I'm getting quite a nice bit of shallow depth of field. Background's quite nice and blurry here. And it's without any of that cinematic mode or portrait mode kind of trickery. So it's all just down to this nice big 200 megapixel sensor and that wide 1.69 aperture.
The main camera uses Samsung's HP1 200 megapixel sensor with a nice big f1.69 aperture, and that makes the phase detection autofocus important because the shallower the depth of focus, the harder it is to keep your subject in focus. The sensor also comes with optical image stabilization. The 12T Pro comes with Xiaomi Pro Focus, which they say includes motion tracking focus, motion capture, and eye tracking focus. The autofocus is really good for a mid-range phone. When I was filming myself, I found it kept focus on my face pretty well. The only real issue I had was in a low light situation, where it did take a little bit longer to find me, but it still got me in focus in the end. In low light, the main camera performs really well. There is noise, but I find it to be kind of nice noise. In these shots, the noise looks a little bit more like film grain than that horrible artifacty noise you get normally. And if I switch to the front selfie camera, you can see what I mean. Now I'm getting that more ugly noise, which just looks low quality, even though this is a not too shabby 20 megapixel camera. The performance in low light really doesn't match the main camera, as you would expect. Xiaomi says that the 200 megapixel imaging system is backed by groundbreaking hardware and Xiaomi's own advanced AI algorithms. AI algorithms will be things like dynamic tone mapping, which helps to add dynamic range to photos and videos. But if it's not done well, it can cause flickering and artifacts. But in the 12T Pro, it seems to work pretty well, from what I can tell from about 3 or 4 days of filming. The good thing is that you can switch to Pro mode and get full manual control. You'll have less dynamic range, but you will remove any kind of glitching or dynamic tone mapping issues.
So while the main camera really does stand out, what about the other cameras?
On the rear, the 12T Pro also has a ultra-wide and a macro camera, but there really is quite a noticeable difference in the quality. To access the ultra-wide camera, we can tap this button here. Thing is, there's 3 lens selectors here, which might lead you to believe the 12T Pro has a telephoto camera. Well, in fact, it doesn't. So all this button does is zoom in 2 times on your main camera sensor. Xiaomi calls this an in-sensor 2x zoom that can utilize the capabilities of the large sensor size. In other words, this camera has 200 million pixels, which gives us plenty of room to crop in. If you press and hold on the 1x button, that brings up a zoom slider and some more zoom buttons, so we can zoom in up to 6 times in video mode and up to 10 times in photo mode. And using those 200 million pixels, it does quite a good job. To access the macro camera, we need to tap the menu button in the top left corner. If you're using it to shoot video, you'll find you're limited to 720p. The quality isn't that great, but how often do you shoot macro video? On the other hand, macro photos do come out nice and sharp. The ultra-wide camera sensor is only 8 megapixels, and I think it shows. And the macro sensor is only 2 megapixels. From the results I got experimenting with these alternative lenses, I think, for shooting video at least, I would stick to the main camera as much as possible. So if you do switch to the macro camera in video mode, you're going to need to reset the resolution and frame rate settings when you toggle it off again. That's just something to remember, otherwise you might find yourself filming a bunch of 720p video footage and you only realize when it's too late. Finally, we have the selfie camera, which comes with a decent 20 megapixel sensor. The max resolution for this camera is still only 1080p, but you can go up to 60 frames per second. Again, there is a definite drop-off in quality compared to the main camera. There's less dynamic range and you lose the shallow depth of field.
So with the selfie camera, you can apply a beauty filter, and you can also apply a fake blurry background filter. For this video, I've added a bit of both, about halfway.
The main camera comes with OIS. Again, it works quite well. I suspect there's some digital stabilization going on as well, as you can see some slight artifacts created when you move the camera. So while this stabilization is good, it doesn't match the flagship devices like a top iPhone or a top Samsung. Now you might think that the best thing to do then is to turn this off, and I would recommend you do so if you want the highest quality video. But in regular video mode, you can't actually switch off stabilization. So to switch it off and to get rid of those artifacts, you need to switch to Pro mode. And then just open settings and toggle it off. Now when I did this, I'm pretty sure there's still some stabilization being applied. And it seems that if you want to completely switch it off, that you need to switch to 8K resolution. Now if you want that kind of cinematic film look, you need to really shoot in 24 frames per second, because that's the frame rate professionals use when they shoot dramas and movies for the cinema. But the only way to shoot 24 frames per second with this device is actually to switch to 8K. In other resolutions, 24 frames per second is grayed out and you can't select it. Now, if you don't want 8K, but you do want to shoot 24 frames per second, one thing you can do is to shoot in 8K and then you can just compress it down to 4K after you've filmed it within the device itself. I did find that the 8K footage to be a little bit buggy. I found that some shots didn't come out smooth. And in Adobe Premiere, I found that one 8K shot that was supposed to be 24 frames per second had actually come out at about 20 frames per second.
So why does that happen? Well, usually it's because the video is dropping frames, and that usually happens if the processor in the device filming is under pressure, there's too much going on and it can't cope. So for example, filming at 8K is going to put pressure on the processor and it's going to demand a lot of processor power. That said, this is Qualcomm's new beast of a processor, so you would have thought that it could handle shooting 8K. Anyway, hopefully this is just a glitch and something they can fix in the future.
If you want that serious, heavy-duty stabilization so that the footage is really perfectly smooth, the 12T Pro has a super steady mode for video. Just tap this button here on the left, and now you will get a noticeable delay as it uses digital stabilization to smooth out your footage. When I switched it on and took a quick run, I found that the resulting footage wasn't too clean though. It's a little bit messy here, more artifacts. So honestly, I wouldn't use that unless I really desperately needed to. If you really want the best quality cinematic B-roll, then I would recommend using a gimbal. This is the new DJI Osmo Mobile 6, which has a zoom and focus wheel. You can switch it to focus mode and then you can shoot really pro focus pulls using the wheel. To shoot a focus pull, you need the Mimo app, and if you have an Android, you need to go to the DJI download page on their website and download from there. The Android version of the Mimo app is a little bit more limited than for iPhones, so there's no 60 frames per second option on the main camera, and there's no manual controls either. So unless you want to use the Mimo features, I recommend switching to the native Xiaomi Camera App when using the gimbal. The Osmo Mobile 6 now has a mode button, so you don't need the app to change modes or to see which mode you're in. Also, you can see how much battery you've got left on the gimbal. Now I'm going to switch to Pro mode in the Xiaomi Camera App, set it to 4K and 60 frames per second, and I'll go into settings and switch off image stabilization. Now when I edit this footage, I'm going to slow it to 50%, so now I have really smooth video without any artifacts created by inbuilt stabilization.
So using the Osmo Mobile's extending handle, it just makes it a little bit easier to film yourself. You can get a distance from the camera. I'm actually using the main camera now, and I'm using the inbuilt microphone on the Xiaomi, just to give you an idea of the quality of those microphones, because I think that they're actually pretty good. I surrender to you. I surrender Here's a quick tip for shooting video or photographs with your smartphone, or actually any camera. If you shoot during the sunset or the sunrise, the light that you get is much softer. It's much more flattering. It's this beautiful warm golden light, and everything just looks more beautiful, and your sensor is much more able to handle the contrast.
Xiaomi phones come with an AI editing feature. The idea of using AI for creative reasons is to speed up the process and let some artificial intelligence do some of the work for you. The question is, does it actually do a good job? Or would you be better off just doing it yourself? So I'm just going to quickly show you how to use this feature, and then you can try it. Open the gallery and tap the three dots top right to open a drop-down menu. Tap Video Editor. Now select all the clips that you want the AI to edit for you. I would say it's best to add a number of clips, say about 10 minimum. Otherwise, if it runs out of clips, it just repeats the same clips. Tap the tick in the top right. The app will import those files into the video editor. At the bottom, you now have a bunch of templates to choose from. If it's the first time, it will need to download the template first. So I'm going to choose Daydream because I think it fits my nature footage. Now the AI edits the clips I selected to some music, and it adds some color filter effects as well. To export, just tap Save, which is top right. Now, if you're not convinced with that particular template, you can actually try a different one. And all you have to do is tap it, and the AI will now cut a new sequence using the same clips that you've already imported. So I'm going to try Memories. I think I prefer Memories, really. I think it's somehow a little bit more interesting than the Daydream one.
So what do you think? I think it's not too bad actually. I think that some parts of the clips I wouldn't have chosen myself. I mean, it's picked some funny parts of the clips, like where I'm getting the camera ready and then I'm not actually filming, you know, like the beginning of the shot where it's shaking. Sometimes it uses that part and not the nice smooth part. So I probably, if I edited it myself, I would do a better job, but it might take me an hour or so fiddling around. So for that reason, it does, you know, quite a good job. So one little thing you can do before you start editing, if you trim off all the little scruffy parts of the clip, then you know at least the AI is just going to use the good parts.
You don't have to accept what the AI gives you though. If you tap Editor at the bottom, you can now use the app's editor to adjust clips and do all the basic stuff that you do with an editing app like VN or CapCut. Also, in this drop-down menu, you can find a feature called Video Effects. You can use this for adding various effects to your portrait videos, which means basically a video with a person in it. Choose a clip with a subject in it. Tap Next, and at the bottom you will find a bunch of effects. Swipe to choose an effect, and some of these will need downloading before first use. Now play the video and press and hold an effect for the length that you want it to be applied. The app will add this effect for as long as you hold down your finger, and in the timeline it shows you where the effect has been placed, so you can just keep adding this effect in different places or add a different effect. And you'll see the different effects as different colors on the timeline. And so I can play back the clip and see how it looks. And if I like it, I can tap Save top right. And if I don't, I can tap the back button to remove them and then have another go.
If you want to learn more about smartphone filmmaking, you can join me on Patreon, where I have many downloads. I've got ebooks, video lessons, there's my regular filmmaking podcast, and you can also chat to me on Discord or just on Patreon. If you have any particular issues that you're struggling with, I'll be there to guide you through it all with my years of experience as a smartphone filmmaker.